Good morning. Happy Monday to you. Hope you guys had a great weekend. And let's get started, shall we? It is quarter number 2, of course, day number 5, day number 49 overall. November 2nd. Oh, it is not Friday. That's what you call wishful thinking. Oh no, Mr. B. What's up? Monday, there we go. November 2nd, today my older son, turns 34 years old. It is his birthday. And yes, he already received his birthday card up in Cincinnati. We will continue reading Election, A Kid's Guide to Picking Our President by Dan Gutman. And we're going to be looking at the chapter on voting. So that's appropriate since tomorrow is the official election day, although lots of people have been voting early, including my wife and I. We rode down to downtown Clearwater on our bicycles last Sunday. I think I told you about that, to vote. A couple new videos on the Electoral College and how that works. We're going to keep this up here because you're going to use this information to do your own electoral map of the election results on Wednesday. We get the results in. And you still have a chance to recite the preamble to the Constitution of the United States of America. Please make sure you're reading each day, 15 minutes of fiction, 10 minutes of nonfiction. And today we're going to be using our 10 words for a sentence review, types of sentences, simple and compound sentences. And you're going to write 3 simple sentences and 3 compound sentences using the spelling and vocabulary words. For example, the furious man's face turned bright red, and I made the subject red and the predicate or verb green. So face turned. That's a simple sentence, 1 subject, 1 verb. My intelligent sister can solve math problems in her head, but I must write them out. Sister can solve. I must write connected with a comma and a conjunction. And then identify the sentences on this practice page. We have a new editing topic. It's about weather instruments, what we use to measure the weather. And there's a cool little video about weather instruments. Our geography focus, of course, you know, the social studies, we're all wrapped up right now in government study of the United States and the election process. We're going to be looking at the geography of Florida, the place where we live. And there's a cool video here on that, and then a description of Pinellas that we'll be reading together during our meeting. And we're going to look closely at the geography of where we live. Find the elevation of your Pinellas County location, your condo, your apartment complex, your house, and you'll find out how many feet or meters it is above sea level, the average sea level of the Gulf of Mexico. My house in Dunedin is 33 feet above sea level. We're also going to be looking at the vegetation of Pinellas County. In other words, what grows here? What's the soil like? By the way, it's pretty sandy. I think you probably know that. And also you can type in Google, look up aerial photos of Pinellas County, specifically historic ones, and you can kind of see what the place used to look like. And we'll look and see how the population grew in Pinellas County, which it grew very rapidly. Today in your small groups, you're going to look at a site called Mental Up Brain Games, and you're going to choose some of those to play together. They're really cool. It's a really cool site. I discovered it over the weekend. And we got fun facts of the day, the weather tying into our editing. The naming of hurricanes and tropical storms officially began in 1953. The wind doesn't make a sound unless it blows against an object. Now, I did not know that. That was a fun fact for me Mr. B, because we hear sound in our ears, but it's not the wind making the sound. It's the force of the air hitting our ears that makes it go whoosh. There is no sound actually in wind unless it hits something. Waterspouts can make sea creatures rain from the sky. And weather occurs in the troposphere, which ties into our geography maps. All right, let's go into our book on the election. Today, appropriately enough, as stated, it's the chapter on voting. Why is voting important? In a nation of more than 300 million people, it may seem like voting really isn't that important. With so many other people out there voting, what difference could one vote for or against a candidate mean? In fact, it could make a lot of difference. Consider this. In the 1882 election to the Virginia House of Representatives, this is the way the voting turned out. Robert Mayo, 10,505 votes. George Garrison, 10,504 votes. If just one voter had cast a ballot for Garrison instead of Mayo, Garrison and Mayo would have been tied and the election would have had to happen all over again. And that wasn't a once-in-a-lifetime event. 4 times in America history, federal elections were decided by one single vote. One vote saved President Andrew Johnson from being removed from office in 1868. And one vote gave Adolf Hitler the leadership of Germany's Nazi Party in 1923. Each vote counts. In some other countries, citizens cannot vote or have a say in the way their government is run. Millions of people come to America for the simple reason that we have the right to vote. That right should not be taken for granted. By voting, we can change laws we disagree with. We can fire leaders we feel are not doing a good job. Our democracy only reflects what Americans want if Americans vote. And if only a tiny percentage of those people vote, then it's only for reflecting a tiny percentage of the opinions and attitudes of Americans. When can I vote for president? The day you turn 18 years old, you become a legal adult. Then you will be old enough to vote in any election. The right of citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of age. Now that is Amendment number 26, because the age in the previous version of the Constitution before that amendment, which had to be 21. Can I just show up on election day once I turn 18? No. First, you have to register to vote in the community where you live. This may have to be done well in advance of election day, depending upon your state. How do I register? Well, it's pretty simple and only takes a few minutes. You just go to the voter registration office at your local city hall or ask for a voter registration card, also where you get your driver's license, license plates, things like that. After you fill it out and send it in, you will receive a notice in the mail telling you where to go to vote. If you move to another town or state, you have to register to vote again. Are there grown-ups who aren't allowed to vote? Yes. People who are not American citizens cannot vote. Neither can citizens who aren't registered, temporary visitors, convicted criminals, or the insane. Also, each state has its own residency requirement. You have to live in your state for a minimum amount of time before you can vote there. But we're talking about very small numbers of people here. Almost all Americans have the right to vote. Has it always been this way? No. When America was in infancy, very few people were allowed to vote. Different states had different requirements, but in general, before 1825, people who didn't own land could not vote. Before 1870, African Americans could not vote. Before 1920, women could not vote. Spain gave women the right to vote in 1931. Italy and France waited until after World War II. Women in Switzerland couldn't vote until 1971. Before 1924, Native Americans couldn't vote. Before 1964, people who lived in Washington, D.C. could not vote for president. Before 1971, 18 to 20-year-olds could not vote. During the Vietnam War, many felt that it wasn't fair that teenagers could be drafted to fight and die for their country while they were not allowed to vote. The 26th Amendment lowered the age to 18. Even after these various groups were given the right to vote, in many cases, the system made it difficult for them. They had to pass literacy tests, learn to speak English, or travel long distances. It took several voting rights acts of the 1960s and 70s to eliminate the barriers to fair registration and voting for all. In 1993, Congress passed what came to be called the Motor Voter Bill. Citizens can register to vote when they apply for a driver's license. And that's what I did when I moved to Florida. When I got my driver's license in July of 2005, I went ahead and registered to vote. Can they vote in Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and Guam? Yes, they're territories, but they cannot vote for the president. Where do people go to vote? Go to the polling place in your neighborhood, maybe a church, a local firehouse, or even your school. If you go with a parent on election day, you will see signs outside the polling place saying it is against the law to campaign there. Inside, there will be a bunch of election officials, volunteers, and one or more voting machines. Your parent will wait in line, then give their name to an elected election official. That person will check in a book to make sure your parent is registered to vote. They will check off the name to make sure nobody tries to vote twice. It happens sometimes. Then your parent will be told which voting machine to use. For example, since I voted early in downtown Clearwater, if I showed up at my polling place close to where I live, I might be arrested because I will be trying to vote twice. And we don't look too kindly upon that. Everybody gets one vote. How does a voting machine work? Well, in ancient Greece, the citizens voted simply by raising their hand. That wasn't exactly fair, though. If everybody knew how you were going to vote, people could pressure you to vote a certain way and make sure you did what they told you. In other words, it was a public thing. Everybody saw who voted for what. That can be a problem. What was needed was a secret ballot. This is sometimes called an Australian ballot because it was developed there in the 1850s. In early America, they used wooden ballot boxes with a slot at the top to slip in a piece of paper that had been marked for one candidate or another. There were problems there too. It took a long time to count all those slips of paper. Sometimes there were mistakes. Sometimes election officials were bribed to make mistakes. The first voting machines were used in Lockport, New York in 1892. They've changed quite a bit since then, but the basic idea is still the same. Here's how a voting machine works. You step into a large booth about the size of a bathroom stall. You pull a switch that closes a curtain behind you so nobody can see who you're voting for. The switch also unlocks the voting machine so votes can be cast. In front of you is a list of candidates and the positions they are running for. The presidency is probably not the only job up for grabs. People may be running for governor at the state, senator, mayor, sheriff, judge, and so on. The ballot this year was two sides of one long paper and then one side of another long paper. And there was all kinds of amendments to vote on, people to vote on, judges, mayors in Dunedin. So there was a lot to vote on. Now we're going to skip this a little bit because let me tell you how the voting machine works in our county. You fill out this long piece of paper and you take a pen and you're literally bubbling in answers, below the person you want to vote, or you're voting yes or no on an amendment. And you make sure that bubble's filled in completely. And when you're done, you take it to the voting machine and you slide it in, it whoosh, takes it in, and then it lets you know that your vote was counted. Then you can check online to see if your vote was counted, and it says, yes, you have turned in your ballot and your vote was counted, which is pretty cool. You can sometimes go into the booth, depending upon the polling place. And the people there are very nice, poll workers. A lot of times are retired people that care about their country, and they take their job very seriously because they believe in democracy and everybody's right to vote. So they'll show you a lot of interest and say, cool, good for you. You're here to be with your parents while they vote. Now, you can't pull any lever or vote for anybody, but sometimes you can even fill out a pretend ballot. What happens after that, after you voted? When the polls close at the end of the day, an election judge will lock up the voting machines so no more votes can be cast, and they'll keep it locked for 30 days in case a recount needs to be done. A compartment of the machine is open in front of several witnesses. The results are recorded. The election judge Judge prepares a certificate showing how the vote came out that is given to the Board of Elections, which compiles the results from all the voting machines in that district and reports the results. There has been talk that someday elections will be done entirely online, but even with all of our technology, the fear is once it goes out into the internet, people are going to figure out ways to break into the system and twist up all the voting, and people might have the ability to do that aren't even American citizens, that just want to upset the process here in America. So there's lots of checks to make sure that the procedure is done properly. So if you hear stories about, oh, the votes are being tampered with, it's fixed or anything like that, do know that there are many, many different layers to make sure that the votes are counted accurately. Do you have to vote for your political party's candidate if you don't like that person? No, lots of Democrats will vote for the Republican candidate and lots of Republicans will vote for the Democratic candidate. This is called crossing party lines, and there's nothing wrong with it. Each political party can count on a certain number of its members, faithfuls, to vote for the party no matter who their candidate is. But a very large number of Americans, possibly as high as 1/3, don't make their decision until just before Election Day. That's why the polls are not always correct, because people can change their minds like that. These undecideds are very important. The candidate who can convince them to give them their vote is very often the one who will win the election, and especially if they can do that at the last minute. And that's why you're bombarded with all of these names and commercials so that you have this recognition of their name when you go in there. And for some reason, people that recognize a name are more likely to vote for that person based upon nothing else other than, I recognize that name because you saw it in commercial after commercial. But that's how it works. If I was eligible to vote, could I vote for my teacher instead of the candidates? Yes. At the polling place, they have what is called irregular ballots for people who wish to write in the name of someone who is not on the ballot. There are always a few jokers who write in names like Mickey Mouse or a protest against the election process, but almost all voters vote for one of the candidates who is running. In fact, on our ballot in Pinellas County, you can actually write somebody in, like your mom. I want my mom to be president, or your dad, but that will just be one vote, and you're kind of wasting your vote. Because there's no way, millions of people are going to vote for your parents unless they're actually running and they represent a ticket for the Republicans or Democrats. Can you vote if you're out of town on election day? Yes, some people can't make it to the polls. This would include people who are in the hospital or disabled, people on vacation, college students living away from home, people in the military, and people on business trips. In those cases, citizens can vote if they get an absentee ballot. It's simply a form that is filled out, must be mailed to the local board of election in advance of election day, so it can be counted. In other words, if you have people in your life that are planning on mailing in their ballot today, that's a big mistake because it will not arrive until after election day and probably, most likely, will never be counted. So it's best to go and drop those off at one of the sites throughout the county. Does everybody vote who is registered to vote? Unfortunately, no. In the 1960 presidential election, less than 63% of all the registered voters actually voted. If you think that's low, in the 1996 presidential election, only 49% voted. In other words, not even half of the people that were registered to vote bothered to vote. That's a big chunk of people. Imagine if that had been like 70%. Somebody else might have been elected. You never know. Some groups tend to vote more than others. Wealthy people vote more than poor people do. Educated people vote more than uneducated people do. Older people vote more than younger people do. The lowest voter turnout is always among the 18 to 21-year-olds, which is kind of funny because a lot of effort went into allowing them to vote. And I know when I turned 18, I registered immediately and I voted as soon as the first election rolled around. And I've been voting ever since. In other democracies such as Japan, Italy, and Australia, voter turnout is much higher than it is in the United States. But then in Australia, citizens who don't vote are actually fined financially. You didn't vote, that'll be $100, please. So more people show up to vote. Why would people not want to vote? Why would anyone not vote? There's lots of reasons. Some people simply have a hard time getting to the polls. Others might be just too lazy, or the opposite, too busy to take time to do it. And some people are satisfied with the way things are going and don't really see any need to vote for a change. Some are completely disinterested and just figure that people who care more than they do will make good decisions for the country. Still others say they haven't paid close attention to the issues, so they don't feel they can make an informed choice among the candidates. Finally, some people complain that they don't like any of the candidates, or they are disillusioned with politics, that they feel it wouldn't matter which candidates are running the country anyway. And sometimes it rains on election day and people don't want to go outside. There have been candidates that have lost elections because of rain. It's true. One party tends to vote no matter what the weather is. Another party tends to not vote if the weather's bad. I won't tell you which party is which. You can ask your parents that. They probably know too. And then how do you decide which candidate to vote for? The one with the best commercials? Well, often that's the case. The one I see the name most when I'm going around the county looking at all the signs? Yep, a lot of people vote for that reason too. But really, you should vote for the person that you feel best represents your opinions about the country and how it should be run. It really just comes down to that. And you need to do a little study, a little reading up, and figure out what exactly is the person that supports what I care about. Who is that person? Now, tomorrow we'll be reading the election itself because it's election day. And all the adults said, yay, finally it's over. Well, we hope it's over, because if it's a clear winner Tuesday night, if there's a clear winner, it will be over. But sometimes it's not clear because it's so close. And that if it's within a certain percentage rate of closeness in states, the candidate, either Trump or Biden, can demand a recount, which means it could take days, weeks, sometimes even a month, like it did in 2000. So I'm excited about election day tomorrow. We'll see how it goes tomorrow night and the results, and we'll talk about how to fill out our electoral maps on Wednesday, either red or blue. And red would represent Republicans and blue would represent Democrats. And why those two colors? Well, America loves its TV, and it has since the 1950s. And television decided, network TV decided sometime in the 80s or so, that they would show each state by a certain color. And for whatever reason, I guess they all agreed that red would be Republican and blue would be Democrat. There's no other reason behind it other than let's choose a color. All right. See you soon.